Fridays at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. We're off to a interesting start here on a Friday as the San Francisco 49ers have traded for running back Brian Robinson. And, you know, this one had been kind of rumored. And then if you follow Pretty Ricky the dog over on Twitter, he said that this move was going to happen, that Robinson was going to get traded today. But now it's out that Brian Robinson is on his way to San Francisco in a deal from the Washington Commanders. And it seems like a pretty good deal for a running back who's had a lot of opportunities to run the ball. Someone I was a huge fan of coming out of Alabama and the things that he was able to do while there. So this isn't a good move for the 49ers because it bolsters that running back room. We're going to talk about, you know, everything that goes along with Brian Robinson coming to the 49ers. But we also got to talk about the trade, you know, and right here, I bleed red and gold said traded a bag of peanuts for him too. That's it. The 49ers traded a 6th-round pick to get Brian Robinson, the Washington Commanders' former starting running back. So you're getting a nice addition here. You're getting somebody that's played a lot of football games in his career and taken a lot of carries. And this is something the 49ers need. They needed depth at the running back position, and they just got it in a big way. Now you look at the running back room, and you have Christian McCaffrey. You have Brian Robinson. You have Isaac Guerendo, who now can just be a change-up speed type guy. But if he gets injured, you have Brian Robinson to count on. He can eat a lot of reps. And then you have Jordan James. Now, this probably spells the end for Jeff Wilson Jr. in San Francisco, to tell the truth. And, you know, this right here from Chris McForty-Niner, or Mr. 49er, says basically traded Mason for Robinson. Yeah, I mean, you know, now that you've made this trade, you got Marquise Siegel with that pick, one of the picks, right, that got you, or that you sent Jordan Mason away for. You got Marquise Siegel, and you got Brian Robinson for the other half of that trade, a next year 6th-round pick. So exactly, Jordan Mason for Brian Robinson and Marquise Siegel. When you look at it, it's kind of an interesting way to look at the 49ers trade method. Yeah, they sent a player away that everyone liked, that I'm sure the staff liked in Jordan Mason. But when you look upon return now and you get Brian Robinson and Marquise Siegel, who could be a starting safety for the 49ers, he will be at some point, but even as quickly as this year, it is just crazy, the fact that they've been able to do it. And I love this from Momo Morton. We will be run heavy for sure, 100%. And towards the beginning of the season, you need to be run heavy. But now it starts opening some possibilities as well about what about McCaffrey and Brian Robinson in the backfield together, right? People have been wanting McCaffrey to play some slot receiver, can make for some unique opportunities to use him. So I think it's a pretty interesting thing. And Eric Dane says, at this point, the 49ers could build a 53-man roster with nothing but running backs and wide receivers. They have had a bunch of them coming. So let's go over a little bit of the details of what's going on, because it's more than just only a 6th-round pick, but also the Washington Commanders have agreed to pay some of the $3.4 million that is owed to Brian Robinson. So you're not just getting a player for a 6th-round pick next year that you already got from the Jordan Mason trade, but also they're going to help facilitate some of that. So this is a really solid trade. And we're seeing John Lynch kind of reach into his bag and pull off a couple of moves strategically that make a lot of sense. We have question marks about our kick returner, punt returner. We need to add a little bit more speed to our wide receiver room. Let's go get Sky Moore for a 6th-round pick swap, right? 6th, 7th-round pick swap in 2027. Now he takes the 2026 6th-round pick he got from Jordan Mason, and he flips that for Brian Robinson. And now we're starting to see the 49ers add depth to their roster. I think this was a really good addition. It's a player that fits the scheme. He fits the system. He's going to be able to eat a lot of carries. That means he can keep Christian McCaffrey healthy. He can keep him fresh. And you don't have to be fully dependent on Isaac Guerendo, which I think is a nice adjustment. It also gives Jordan James time to grow. You no longer have to count on Jordan James to make an impact in games. You don't need a short yardage runner. You have Brian Robinson. So this is a good one. I'm really enjoying the fact that the 49ers are adding to this room, and you can, utilize CMC the right way. And Momo Morton says this, hopefully, keyword, hopefully, Kyle will utilize him and CMC. I think that there's an avenue to do so, especially early on in the season where you're going to have question marks about your wide receiver room, right? How many guys are you going to have? In fact, I was gearing up to do a completely different episode when this news broke. I was going to be talking about the guys who are kind of on the bubble that got to prove something. And the running back room was somewhat figured out because you had the injuries, right? Corey Kiner has reverted back to the 49ers IR, but it was very built up and convoluted. Now it was completely figured out. But Brian Robinson just changed everything. I think it's still figured out. You're going McCaffrey, you're going Brian Robinson, Isaac Guerendo, Jordan James. I think it's figured out who the running back room is going to be now. But it's just interesting that you can add an element like Brian Robinson. And Kyle has used two running backs in the backfield before. He didn't use it last year, and I think everyone was kind of hoping that. But when 2022, when the 49ers traded for Christian McCaffrey, he did have running back sets that had Jeff Wilson Jr. and McCaffrey together. He had Elijah Mitchell and Christian McCaffrey together. And I think there could be some elements to that added back in. And with the first part of the season, and you're worried about the wide receiver room, you knew the offense was going to run through McCaffrey and Kittle. Well, now you have somebody that can kind of take some of the pressure off McCaffrey when it comes to some of the carries in the middle of the game. And I think that that's important. 3rd and 1, you want to run the ball. Let's go Brian Robinson. Let's give Christian McCaffrey a little bit of a break. He doesn't have to take a hit. I think that there's some opportunities to kind of protect Christian, but do a good job of making sure this offense still turns. And that's exactly what is important, is making sure this offense can still turn. You can still move everybody around. So this is a good move for the 49ers. I didn't know if this was going to happen. I didn't really want to speculate on this. When I seen Brian Robinson was potentially available in trade, I was very interested for the 49ers. But are you going to pull the trigger on running back room with some of the depth that you had? Now, it's like I said, Patrick Taylor Jr. injury, Corey Kiner injury. It opened the door that this became a conversation point. And I think Brian Robinson comes into a system that definitely suits his abilities. So I think this is a good move for the 49ers. And Luke says Robinson is better than he's been given the opportunity to be in Washington. And I think we've seen a shift. You had what he was doing in Washington before, right? Dan Quinn and that new regime came in with Jaden Daniels and the way that offense is going to look. They're looking to get a little bit more dynamic at the running back position. Brian Robinson doesn't bring the Isaac Guerendo dynamics, right? The whole shot, big time plays. This is a dude that's going to go out there and reel off 5 to 10 yard carries. Those are kind of like the big plays for him, but he's going to consistently move the sticks. If you want a guy that completely runs forward, runs through arm tackles, and just keeps moving forward with the forward lean, Brian Robinson is that guy. This is a guy that you can count on to get yards and yards after contact. And the 49ers always need one of these guys, right? We've seen guys like this, Elijah Mitchell, Jordan Mason, right? Even last year, a little bit with Patrick Taylor, they missed it a little bit, but these are the kind of guys that you like to get to be able to kind of move the sticks. So I think that it's a smart move to go ahead and add a Brian Robinson and the effects that he can have on this offense. And, Luke says this, but will they? That I don't know. I'm not in the meeting rooms with Kyle Shanahan, and I don't know ultimately what he's going to decide to do. I just see that there are options. And, ultimately as an offensive coordinator, that's what you want is options. A lot of it is going to be determined. I mean, this is truthfully how the defense plans on playing against that type of set. So if Kyle Shanahan puts a 2 running back set out there, how that personnel grouping affects the defense is going to be ultimately why Kyle Shanahan ends up continuing to do it or not do it. He wants to find an advantage. And if it gives him an advantage, he's going to do it. If he doesn't feel it gives him an advantage, he's not going to do it. So whether he does it or not is a big question mark, but the opportunity is now there for him to be able to do it if he wants. And I think that's ultimately the only thing you can hope for is getting those opportunities. And Brian Robinson definitely provides opportunities in the backfield to be able to get some things done. And one of the things the 49ers struggled with last year was efficiency in the red zone, scoring touchdowns, right? 2023, 68% scoring touchdowns in the red zone. And then you look at last year, and it was just a far cry from that. They were one of the worst in the league. It was just a big change. And part of the reason was there was no healthy McCaffrey. You had to make sure that if you have a situation where McCaffrey needs a break, he just had a long run or a big time catch, and you need to get him off the field for a second, that you still have the ability to score a touchdown. All you have to do is go back and you look at, some of the big time games the 49ers have played, and even that NFC championship game against the Detroit Lions, you have a situation where McCaffrey has to come out for a play. Elijah Mitchell hadn't played all game. Comes in, one carry, boom, gets into the end zone for the touchdown. That's the kind of thing they need. And I'm saying Brian Robinson is going to play more than that, but I think that is a good possibility. And, Eric Dane says they took Javon Kinlaw over Tristan Wirfs. Where's Kinlaw now? Yeah, I mean, Kinlaw is in Washington with the Commanders, believe it or not. So that's kind of interesting. But, yeah, I mean, you've got Brian Robinson. And, the guy's had a successful career when you just look at the volume of carries that he's been able to, take. And this is not a guy that's going to, kill you. He doesn't get over 1,000 yards. That's not what he does. But he's rushed for nearly 800 yards in each of his 3 seasons in the NFL. He's on a rookie deal. The Commanders are going to pay most of that money. So this is one of those deals. It's almost too good to pass up when you're talking about the value of the running back and the fact that he's had so many carries in his career. Now, he's never played a full 17-game season, but he's also been a bell cow back. Being a part of a rotation with Christian McCaffrey and Isaac Guerendo should somewhat alleviate that and make him more available. Now, his rookie season, in just 12 games, he had 205 attempts for 797 yards and 2 touchdowns, a 3.9-yard average, which isn't great. But each of the 2 years after that, he's went over 4 yards per carry, which is good. 4.1 yards in 2023 and 4.3 yards in 2024. And he had 733 yards in 2023 and 799 yards in 2024. His touchdown numbers have also went up every single year. In 2022 as a rookie, he had 2. In 2023, he had 5. And last year in 2024, he had 8 touchdowns. And that's a big addition, and something that we've talked about is the advantages of having Brian Robinson and having him help you inside the red zone, which I think is going to be a good thing for this 49ers football team. And it's fun to see the 49ers kind of add, and there was question marks, because everything had to be young and cheap for the 49ers. Is kind of how they built their football team. But when you can add players who have been pretty high draft picks. I mean, you look at Sky Moore. Sky Moore was a 2nd-round pick. Brian Robinson, he was a 3rd-round pick. So there's value here, and these are proven, veterans. Now, they haven't maybe reached full potential. In Brian Robinson's case, I think there's probably a little bit more there, but he showed a lot of his potential. With Sky Moore, there's probably a lot more that he needs to develop. He does add the dynamic kick return and punt return game. So it's kind of interesting to see that they're being able to go out and get these guys, and really for pennies on the dollar. And I think that that's one of the things that I love, is the fact that they're able to get these guys on the cheap. And that's one of the problems with everyone knowing you put someone on the block, is no one really wants to overpay. But think about the 49ers in the last, week and a half. They have been in on John Mechie. Of course, that didn't work out, but they ended up getting Sky Moore. Now they get Brian Robinson. They are engaged. And we have heard rumors, and now the rumors seem to be more true than ever, that the 49ers are out there looking for certain things. They were looking for wide receiver help. They were looking for offensive line help. And now they've added a running back. So there is a chance that they're still in the market for an offensive lineman. So I don't know if this is the last move the 49ers make. We do know they're running up against the deadline, right, to kind of get some moves done. So it's interesting to see them kind of make some moves, and maybe they're going to make some O-line moves. I think that this O-line is definitely needs some additions. They need some help. There could be players available that get cut. That would be upgrades for this 49ers depth on offensive line, but I don't think they're going to improve the starting unit of this offensive line. And I know there's a lot of conversation in chat about offensive line. And, I know that is an addition that everyone would like to see. And, if you listen to my draft content, that is one thing that, I wanted them to do is address offensive line in round 2. They did not. But it doesn't mean that they don't have the opportunity to still do so. We'll see, though. I think you just got to make sure you find the right guy. But along the way, they're doing things that they needed to do. They needed depth at wide receiver. They add. They need a running back now. I think they could have gotten by with Garendo and Jordan James and Jeff Wilson Jr. behind Christian McCaffrey. But now you don't have to get by. You've now bolstered the room. You've gotten better. And I think that this is, an easy move to make when you're talking about what you gave up and what the Washington Commanders are willing to do to help you out. They're willing to pay, and kind of foot the bill on some of this. One of the good things about having relationships with other front offices around the league is sometimes people are willing to work with you. And I think that's what happened here. A good relationship for John Lynch ends up netting the 49ers Brian Robinson. And now he's flying out to San Francisco to get a physical, and it is pending a physical. But I think everybody kind of has the idea that this thing is going to happen. And I think it's good. I think that the 49ers know that they needed to add a running back and kind of get it done. So this is kind of a good move for the 49ers, adding to the roster, giving up barely anything. So it's cool to see the 49ers kind of add some guys, to this roster over the last week or so that are going to be important, not just, in the short term, but in the long term, and kind of the addition they're going to add and the help that they're going to give some of your starters. That is for sure. Just want to say that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you are looking to bet, they've got some good bets this year. The 49ers are favored at plus 160 to win the West. Check out FanDuel. But I do want to not turn away from the comments. So if you guys have things in chat, would have, I'll love to get into it. And, it's crazy that whenever things happen like this, it kind of sparks the conversation of other positions of need. And I love that conversation because I think when you look at the roster, there are positions of need for the 49ers. I think some have figured themselves out, right? Young players have stepped up. 49ers have had key additions through trade or offseason signings. But, offensive line is still one of the question marks. And that is one of the big things in the comment section right now is, you got Mr. Corey saying could have had Drew Dahlman, Zach Frazier, Tristan Wirfs, Quinn Miners, and Creed Humphrey, etc. And I think it's always important to remember that, the 49ers have not addressed offensive line the way that most would want. In this year's draft, there was a lot of people that wanted first-round offensive line. I was pining for a second-round offensive line in Arianti Ursary. He went to the Houston Texans. He's going to start there. And, these are some of the things that happen. But I think that I like that the 49ers are being proactive with other positions right now. And we'll see if they're able to pull off an offensive line move. I think offensive line trades are a little bit more complicated because good offensive linemen are hard to come by. So you don't see them traded very often. Every once in a while, you'll see somebody get traded. We saw it a little bit in the offseason with the Houston Texans and Commanders kind of working out a deal, but you don't see that for the most part. And so I don't know what's available out there when it comes to the trade block for offensive linemen. What I do know is that there could be some players available, and I've kind of started throwing some of those guys out there available. I put it out on Twitter, and one guy I'm kind of watching just to kind of put it out there is Max Mitchell from the New York Jets, a guy I was, very fond of coming out of college, the way he fit the system. And now he might be on the outside looking in with some of the draft picks. They've drafted a lot of offensive tackles, so it might make him available, which could be interesting. So we'll keep an eye on that. But, overall, it's good to see the 49ers making additions because some people were starting to get the impression that maybe the 49ers were kind of understanding they needed to punt the season a little bit, but they don't. They're still in the mix. They're bringing guys in to compete. They're surrounding Brock Purdy with some good players, and Brian Robinson is the next addition to help this team. And I think it just solidifies a room. And you look at the 49ers rooms, and the quarterback room is solidified now. Brock Purdy and Mac Jones, you're solid there. Your running back room, Christian McCaffrey, Brian Robinson, Isaac Guerrero, and Jordan James. It's got a nice mix of veterans and youth. I think that is a good room now. Of course, Kyle Juszczyk also there, right? Your tight end room is starting to take some form. George Kittle and Luke Farrell for sure. It's either Jake Tunges or Braden Willis, and Tunges has kind of developed a lot. So their rooms are starting to solidify. I do believe offensive line is still the position that probably has the most question marks when it comes to depth, and probably the position that that we worry about the most. And it's going to be important with how the 49ers run the football. Now, I could show you examples, and I did over on Patreon, of the offensive line executing well and maybe a wide receiver or a tight end not quite getting the job done. And, a run that went for 5 could have went for 20. And so those things are still happening. It's not all bad for the offensive line, but I do think that there has been more depth in other years. So that is a legit thing. That's definitely a legit conversation. But I think Brian Robinson is going to help this 49ers offense. So for those of you that are just getting in and just checking it out, the 49ers have traded for running back Brian Robinson from the Washington Commanders. They gave up a 6th-round pick, and the Washington Commanders are paying a portion of his $3.4 million that is remaining on his contract. So 49ers have essentially turned the Jordan Mason trade, where last year they got a pick swap that turned into Marquise Siegel, and a 6th-round pick in 2026, which they are sending to the Washington Commanders for Brian Robinson. So you get Siegel and Robinson for Jordan Mason is essentially the deal that has just happened. So I think that this is a great move by the 49ers because it completely gives you the infrastructure at running back to be able to withstand, any injuries that come. Because heaven forbid Christian McCaffrey gets hurt. Now, Brian Robinson is not Christian McCaffrey. He doesn't play like Christian McCaffrey. He doesn't have the same receiving ability as Christian McCaffrey. He's not a wholesale McCaffrey adjustment. But you feel like if something happened to McCaffrey, you could withstand it because Robinson could get a lot of the carries, and Isaac Guerrero could kind of add the dynamics with the speed and some of the receiving ability. So it might take 2 to kind of do some of Christian McCaffrey's work, and they'll never quite get there. But it is a nice addition to have. So that way you can build stability in that running back room. So this was a big move. I honestly didn't think the 49ers would invest in a running back at this point, but they did. And I think that is great. And, Mr. Corey brings this up, and he's completely right. Brian Robinson ain't Jordan Mason either, but I love Siegel. And I don't think Brian Robinson is Jordan Mason. I think that they're entirely different in the way they run. I think Jordan Mason has more physical tools when you look at some of the size and strength than Brian Robinson. I would argue that Brian Robinson is better when it comes to vision, understanding when to cut and getting vertical. I think he's a little bit better at that, but he doesn't have the Jordan Mason's explosiveness. That's not what you see from Robinson. He's more of a bell cow back. He's one of those guys, the more carries he gets, the better he gets in a game. He kind of wears on you. He breaks tackles. He kind of falls forward, similar to Jordan Mason in that department. But they are different style of backs for sure. I think Jordan Mason is one of those guys that could have more explosives. Even him, he wouldn't have the big, long explosives all the time. It was here and there. But Brian Robinson's not going to have them all the time either. So it's interesting. And, this is great right here from Chris, Mr. Niner. Robinson is a better interior runner. I agree. I think that Jordan Mason, a lot of his success was more kind of on the outside, but the vision of Brian Robinson makes him a little bit better on the inside. He has the vision for it. And you could see some guys, right? Last year, Isaac Guerrero was really strong in the inside zone, struggled a little bit in the outside zone. And I think Brian Robinson has the ability to kind of run all, but is a better interior runner than Jordan Mason. Now, I believe Jordan Mason had more explosiveness out on the edge and could kind of turn some big carries out there. But I thought that his vision inside was a little bit different. So I think that that's actually a great comment. Now, I will say this. I love Jordan Mason, and I really like Brian Robinson a lot. So I think that this is a great move. As far as financially, this is a cheaper move than Jordan Mason because the Commanders are paying part of Brian Robinson's contract, and Jordan Mason was up for a new contract, and Minnesota paid him. So in that regard, you save money. And we know that's what the 49ers are trying to do right now. They're trying to save money, yet still be very competitive. Brian Robinson is still young. He's still a guy on his first rookie contract, and he has the ability to go out there and get you some yardage and get some short carries. So I think that Brian Robinson is a solid addition to this 49ers football team. And I think he's going to do a good job of being able to help. And you want stability. And Brian Robinson brings that because he can do it all, right? He can run inside, he can run outside. He's good at pass blocking. He can catch the football. Now, he's got limitations as far as how good he does those things, but he's a guy that can do those types of things. You can trust him, right? He's not going to put the ball on the ground. Those are things that are good. What you're not going to have is the big dynamics, right? The long, explosive 50-yard runs. That's not what you're getting from him. But you need somebody to get 2 yards and get a first down. Brian Robinson's very capable. You need him to come in on third down and pass protect. He can do that. So there are definitely some advantages to having him. Think about a more talented, better running Jeff Wilson Jr. I mean, that's kind of what you're getting out of this. So it's nice to have these guys that can really help your football team. And Brian Robinson is one of those. I mean, this is a starting caliber running back in the NFL. All right. I mean, that's kind of where we're at with Brian Robinson. He is that. He's going to be running back number 2 for the 49ers. So I love that room for the 49ers. I love Bobby Turner being able to get his hands on another guy that's a scheme fit that they can do some work with. I think he's going to make an impact for this 49ers football team right away. And it just is insulation. And, that's something we've talked about a lot over the last several years with the 49ers is insulation at certain positions. You have to make sure you have depth. And running back has been a little bit of an issue, especially through camp, of making sure that you have those guys that are capable of playing and going in. But I love the effects of this. One more time, I want to say this about the Brian Robinson edition. He is going to help take and alleviate some of the tough carries off of Christian McCaffrey. Before, every time that it was 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, or red zone, right around the 1 or 2, McCaffrey had to be in to get those carries. Last year, we saw they weren't as effective in the red zone without McCaffrey. Now you've got a guy that scored 8 touchdowns last year. This is a guy that moves the sticks and gets short yardage runs and carries. This is going to be a huge addition. Also, if McCaffrey needs a break, you feel comfortable with Brian Robinson coming in and running in your offense and not losing yards. And losing yards is one of the big things for offensive coordinators, not having negative plays. So that's one of the big additions that you're going to get from Brian Robinson. Short yardage, the ability to spell Christian McCaffrey, to alleviate some of the pressure, especially in the middle part of the first quarter and the beginning part of quarter number 2. So those are going to be some spots, the third quarter as well. So now we have McCaffrey at the beginning of the game and the fourth quarter fresh. That is something that the 49ers did in 2022 with Elijah Mitchell spelling Christian McCaffrey. But it has to be somebody that Kyle Shanahan trusts. And I think Brian Robinson can kind of earn that trust. So I love that. And big 49er fan for life says Robinson is young, fast, and explosive. He was MVP for Alabama in 2021 in the Cotton Bowl. He will be great behind CMC. I agree. He's going to be really good in this system. And, I think that this is a solid move. And when you get somebody for a draft pick that you picked up from somebody else and they're willing to foot the bill for most of the contract, what really are you upset about, right? This is just a great move. I think this is one that, a lot of 49er fans are going to love. I think there'll be some that are detractors that don't really care for this move, and that's okay. I think that this one's going to be fun to watch play out. But I love the aggressiveness of John Lynch being willing to go out and get players and add them to the roster with Sky Moore and Brian Robinson. And I hope he's looking. I hope he's looking for another position to add. I hope he's looking for a offensive lineman to potentially add, or even a defensive tackle. If you need a big veteran defensive tackle, if you want to move on from a Kalia Davis or Jordan Elliott, I don't know if he'll do that. I don't think defensive tackle is going to be it. I think offensive line is probably the next position you could go for, or tight end. I think those are going to be interesting. But the willingness of John Lynch to go make a move, and for John Lynch to go get a running back that not just a depth piece, but has the ability to be a starter in this league. I think that is the key. Brian Robinson is a starting caliber running back that you're getting to play behind Christian McCaffrey. And that was one of the things they always wanted. Elijah Mitchell, right, was a starting caliber running back when he was healthy to play behind McCaffrey. Then they had Jordan Mason, who was a starting caliber running back to play. Now they have Brian Robinson. This is going to work out well for the 49ers. I think that this is going to be good. This right here from Chris, Mr. Niner, PFF gives Robinson a 12th at pass blocking grade. It's what he does. You can trust him to be in the game and to block. And I think that is a huge part of what we do as far as what the 49ers do. Sometimes I say but what the 49ers do as far as blocking is they have to count on that running back to pick guys up, because the Raiders were overload blitzing the 49ers. And we saw some really good pickups from Jeff Wilson Jr. You worry about guys like Jordan James, right? Picking that up quickly. You don't worry about that with Brian Robinson, especially with him being one of the better running backs at doing it. And so this is going to be one of the key elements to this offense, is running backs being able to do it all. Block, run the ball, catch the ball in the backfield. And Robinson adds, and he adds in a big way. So this is a great addition for the 49ers. 49ers get Brian Robinson from the Washington Commanders for a 2026 sixth-round pick. And the Washington Commanders, according to Mike Garafolo, have agreed to pay some of his $3.4 million starting caliber running back behind Christian McCaffrey. This is going to be a great addition for the 49ers. I like this pickup. I think it's going to be good. Of course, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.